And welcome back to another episode of Building the Board. Today, we are here to talk about cornerback prospects in the 2025 NFL draft, specifically cornerback prospects that, with a Chicago Bears lens on it. I'm joined by Nick Demao and Luke O'Grady. And guys, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Q. It's good to see you again, Luke. Hope you had a good weekend.
Yeah, long time
digging into the cornerback film. If you caught us last time, we talked safeties. I think safety, we can both agree, is a little bit bigger position of need than cornerback at the moment, but definitely not valid without talking about the cornerbacks, because I do think there's a chance the Bears might be looking at some of these guys. So I guess, our questions we always want to get into: what do the Bears have at cornerback currently? It's probably one of the deeper positions on the roster. They have Jaylon Johnson, who I think is a top 10 corner at the position in the league. Tyrique Stevenson, who's kind of polarizing. Kyler Gordon, who's probably one of the better nickels in the league. Terrell Smith, a fifth rounder from a few years ago, who I thought played pretty well for Tyrique Stevenson. Josh Blackwell, who's I think predominantly like a special teams guy. And then Nick McLeod, who they just signed a few days ago, who I honestly do not know a lot about him. I don't know if you know much about him. I know he only played about half the season last year, but the year before that, he racked up some stats. I think he had like 3 forced fumbles, a few interceptions. So maybe a reclamation project for Dennis Allen, which I guess segues well into what kind of cornerback does Dennis Allen like in his offense. As we talked about in the safeties, he runs a lot of cover 1, cover 3. So I think you want guys that can press at the line of scrimmage or get deep, have good recovery speed. And I guess, can we expect the Bears to spend draft capital at cornerback? I think it's one of those positions that there's a few positions I think it's wise to maybe spend a pick if you have, on cornerback. It's just it's a volatile position from year to year. There's a lot of turnover. We saw last year with Tyrique Stevenson getting hurt. Kyler Gordon seems to always miss a game or two a year. So I do think they'll be looking at it, but I don't know, Luke, do you have any other thoughts on what the Bears have currently?
Yeah, I think I am probably I'm on the side of Tyrique Stevenson conversation. I don't know if we can, how much I trust him to be our starting cornerback. I was bullish on him in his first year. He seemed to be a playmaker, and it kind of felt like Shavon Diggs thing that for the yards he was giving up, he was making plays to the ball and doing stuff like that. But the fact that he's a bit of a head case, I don't think anyone would doubt that. And the fact that I think he kind of regressed a little bit this year.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt that I actually think that we have something in Terrell Smith. I think whenever he's played, he's been a great outside corner. And not only that, but probably the type of outside corner that Dennis Allen likes to play with. Like, he is that long press corner and
right.
The game in front of him. And I think so, depending on how he feels about Terrell Smith, I think that you kind of have to have a question mark beside Tyrique Stevenson. And if you like Terrell Smith, and maybe you don't need to spend anything too crazy at this position. Like, you can wait until, the 5th or 6th round, whatever it is.
Right.
But if you're not sure about Terrell Smith and, you have the question marks about Tyrique Stevenson, this is an extremely deep draft class. You can get some really, really good talent pretty much in any round you want to decide to make the move. So if the Bears, are going to make a move, I'd say it'd probably be in those first 5 rounds. Honestly, Josh Blackwell has had some good starting experience for us as well, too.
Yeah.
The real linchpin is Tyrique Stevenson, because I think there's no doubt that you have good backups in Terrell Smith and Josh Blackwell. I think there's a chance that Terrell Smith could be a good starter if given the right opportunity. But if you aren't sure about that, I think you make a move, a big one. And then if not, you can wait a little while longer and hopefully, get some value to line up with someone falling down in the draft and stash someone for, the next year or, a developmental pick type thing.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see the impact that Al Harris, the new defensive backs coach, has on a guy like Tyrique Stevenson. Because I certainly I wonder. I know a big deal of with the Eberflus coaching staff was sort of how I don't know, hands off they were when it comes to, or sort of how long the leash was on certain players and just the lack of accountability. And Al Harris seems like a guy, he kind of seems like the defensive Antoine Randall L, where he's going to hold the guys accountable, and he's, by all accounts, a great defensive backs coach. So I'm with you. Tyrique Stevenson is definitely the dude that is the linchpin when it comes to
how you want to approach it.
Yeah, what you can expect, because his rookie year he looked really good. Last year, I definitely think he took a step back. He also seems to be a player that corner is one of those positions you have to have a short memory, and I think he's one of those guys that he when he has a hot hand and he's playing really well, he can be a game wrecking corner. But then when a couple bad plays happen, he can sort of lose sight of himself.
Yeah, it can snowball with Tyrique Stevenson.
Yeah.
That Washington game is honestly the worst.
Yeah,
because even heading into that Hail Mary play, even if the Hail Mary play didn't happen, he got beat up on all game, and he couldn't get out of his own way.
Right. And there's nothing more annoying than a football player who's had a bad game, and then right when they think that they're going to win, he's trash talking, and it's like, dude, just do your job and get the W.
You need to get into the tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that being said, let's hop into the prospects. Like you alluded to, I think it's a really good class. I think there's going to be, it will be interesting to see how many of these guys go in the first round. I think it's a class where you could see, I was telling Q kind of in the pre-chat just how I've seen mocks where I've seen 5 or 6 guys go in the first round. I think that's a little heavy, but I could certainly see 3 or 4. I think 3 might be the minimum, but I could see 4, maybe 5 slipping in the back half.
So I haven't looked at what the public perception is, which is interesting. But on my own grades, just looking at the 8 that we have here, I have probably 5 or 6 second round grades or higher.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the guys that we'll get into, especially Morrison and maybe even Shavon, they're first round talents that they're just injury concerns or, maybe kept them from reaching their full potential this year. I think starting off, we'll just get right into Travis Hunter. I don't think the Bears draft him. I think he's a top 3 pick. So, but he is worth mentioning. I think, you could just say he's another Champ Bailey. For those that don't remember, Champ Bailey coming out of Georgia played both ways and was just I think he made 11 out of 12 Pro Bowls. He was just an insane player, and it's high praise, but Travis Hunter is just an amazing prospect. You watch the film, there's not really any type of cornerback. You can ask him to play press, outside man. You could ask him to play zone. You could ask him to play anything. He seems to excel at. Do you think he'll play both ways in the NFL? Do you think he's going to end up when he gets drafted declaring a position, or because I think I have first round grades on him at both, but I don't know if he'll end up settling for one over the other or.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so foreign. You've never seen it done. Not at the rate that they did it in college, playing the full slate. You had some players that would do a bunch of defense, then would get mixed in on offense, or the guys that played a bunch of offense, like Troy Brown, that got mixed in on defense too.
Right.
But he legitimately had the chops to do it both ways. Yeah. He is a first round, honestly, probably a top 10 prospect at both positions. I feel pretty confident with that.
Yeah.
As a receiver, he's he's an insane playmaker, and it's strikingly similar as a DB as well.
Right.
He is his instincts are absolutely next level. His ability to make the play, when he's in man, when he's in zone, when he's trailing, when the ball's in front of him, when in screen plays, his ability to just make the play is otherworldly. He's always making the right play. It's insane.
Yeah. It's insane to, like you said, insane is a great word, because you would think, okay, this guy plays both ways. There's got to be cracks in his game. Even with Champ Bailey, he played technically wide receiver and cornerback at Georgia, but I think everybody assumed he would settle in at cornerback at the next level because it just seemed like it was more of a fit for him. Right. With Travis Hunter, you could the only thing I think that if I was an NFL GM, and I've seen this point brought up, and I thought it was a really good point, is if you do go into the season with Travis Hunter, let's say as your cornerback 1 and wide receiver 2, like let's say, I guess to start, and he gets injured, then you've got 2 holes to fill in your roster that I'd never considered if you do, and calling that a weakness is honestly, it's like a backhanded weakness because it's a testament to how good he is as a player that, that would be that big of a loss.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't considered it.
Like, you'd get your most value out of him. Like he's shown he can do both at like the workload level. You'd get your most value out of him, like doing that. But you might get your most value out of him long term by not letting him and freeing up 2 holes if he does get hurt. Yeah,
and because like you said, he can definitely play either. I wonder. So I don't know, I don't know who's going to end up drafting him. I've seen him mock, I'd be really interested. Yeah, it would be, I think a really good coaching staff could really come up with an interesting game plan for him. I don't, with the teams at the top of the draft, I don't know. I've seen him mock to the Giants, and I told Q, I saw someone mention he's a perfect prospect because he'll catch as a receiver all of Jameis's good passes and then defend all of his bad ones.
Yeah.
But like he could be such a weapon. But I also, you do worry about the longevity of a player that might want to play both sides of the ball. And I don't think, he was coached by Deion Sanders, but I didn't notice him being any, Deion's biggest knock. And I think it was a little overrated, but they ever said, he made business decisions when it came to tackling. And I didn't see a lot of that out of Hunter. I thought he was a willing tackler. So, I think he has good size. I mean, he can certainly play both. I think he's worthy of a top 10 pick at either cornerback or wide receiver. It would just be what, our team's thinking he's actually going to go in there and play both, or is it going to be, I would think it'd be more likely he would play cornerback and then they design like 3 or 4 packages for him on offense that he plays, but that's easier said than done. He could get in camp and look like the best at both sides of the ball. And it's hard for a coach to be like, well, we'll let you play the full slate on defense and then give you like 20 snaps on offense. So
it's a shame because like, he's actually such a cool prospect and such a high upside type player that you actually do need to be a little bit lame as the head coach and be like, we need to protect our investment here.
Yeah.
Even if you never played a snap at offense, like you would be worthy of this pick. So we need to get at least a starting caliber corner out of you.
Right.
But it could be something where it's like, you feel out what you have with your roster, and then it's something like when you're playing a pickup game and there's subs, but then there's 3 minutes left. So the subs don't come on anymore. The best guys stay on. It's like when it's the 4th quarter, it's like, okay, just go play offense. And where you get the playoffs, it's like, Travis, you're playing 60 minutes today.
Right. Because it could be one of those things too, where he starts the year heavy at cornerback as he's learning the playbook for offense. And then maybe towards the back half, it becomes more, like you said, it's tough to evaluate him because he can do both. It's such a elite level. So you don't want to like cut out his legs beneath him and say, well, we're just going to have you playing cornerback. But if a guy like that got hurt and it would just, for a team like the Giants who are struggling with talent.
Like imagine Jaylon Johnson got hurt because he was running goal line fade.
Yeah. And Rome Odunze. Yeah. But then it was also like, it was Jaylon Johnson, but also Rome Odunze at the same time. Like they knocked knees at practice or something. Like that would kind of be like what losing Travis Hunter could be like. So
that's a great point.
I don't know. I think it was just worth giving him his flowers. I don't think the Bears are going to be in a position to draft him, but it'll be interesting to follow his career.
I don't want to get crazy, but he really is a crazy type prospect. And I think that the Bears could probably argue that they still want to add something in the wide receiver and the DB department. It wouldn't blow my mind if the Bears look at what a trade up might look like in this draft if they have their mind on someone.
Yeah,
whether that's a pass rusher or something like that. But like if you end up going like quarterback Abdul Carter quarterback,
I was gonna say
pick like 4 or 5 and he's still there, like you might want to start consider making that call up.
I'm pulling up the draft order now because I totally blanked on like what it is because it's Titans, Browns, Giants, Patriots. You could argue that. I mean, I guess the Patriots need wide receiver help, but they've got Christian Gonzalez, so they could realistically take him. And then it's Jaguars, Raiders, Jets, Panthers, and Saints. So I mean, I definitely think he'll go. But yeah, like you said, if maybe he slips into that like 6-7 range, especially a team like the Raiders that maybe think we could swap with the Bears and get Genty at 10, and then they can move up to 6 and give us something to sweet, move, maybe they'd be inclined to make a deal if he fell. Cause
they're probably in a position where they would like to accumulate some, if they miss out on these quarterbacks, especially with where they're at, they could even, I guess they have Geno, but like, they probably need to think about the future too.
Yeah, for sure. Cause, Geno nor Pete Carroll are getting any younger. So, moving on, Jahdae Barron, I really liked. So I really like Jahdae Barron. I don't know what you thought of him, but the whole Texas backfield. We talked about Makuban last.
Oh my God, man.
He is. I think both these guys are so good. I think they
seriously
and
they're so good. I was actually thinking like whoever's the DB coach there. I gotta say that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because
right now.
So following his career, like he was mostly playing in the slot up until this year, and then they moved him outside, and he just, he lit the world on fire.
Seriously,
he's a smooth moving cornerback, decent size, 5'11", 194, so nothing really out of the ordinary there. Another guy that I actually really like. I like his game. I don't know at the NFL level. I don't know. He would be. I could see some team using him like the Bears use Kyler Gordon as one of those like super slots that can also play. I feel like I'd love if the Bears drafted him. I think they kind of have a redundancy with Kyler Gordon on the roster, which made me think then, what are they like? With a player like Barron, is that worth, when the Bears first drafted Kyler Gordon, they tried him out. They were having him play outside and slot, and they kind of were trial by fire. And, say a guy like Barron is someone who's there with one of their second round picks. And I think a lot of people think he'll be gone in the first round, but let's just say he slips to like 39 or 41. Is it worth the conversation of, well, can we get this guy? And, maybe we have another great slot and we just see if Kyler Gordon can play outside. And then if not, we can try this guy outside. I think it would be a problem that the Bears would love to have, because I think both players are really good. And, depending on what they think of Tyrique Stevenson, I think a player like Jahdae Barron is someone that Dennis Allen would love to have on the roster.
Yeah, he is. I think that, and it's funny to say because of, how much talk Will Johnson got all throughout the year. But I think for me, there's a clear tier at the top of this list. And I think that Jahdae Barron and Travis Hunter are like elite level, leadership prospects of the cornerback position. I think what Jahdae did this year, going out to corner and looking, after having 2 great years in the slot, going out to corner, switching his number, pretty swag. I'm going to play the position, I'm change my number. Switches his number, and not only like gets the job done, but might have looked better out there where, you probably had some concerns about him doing it. He's built more like what you'd imagine a nickel to be. He's 5'10", but 195. And outside they usually want those longer corners to deal with those like wide receiver ones, but he didn't look out of place at all. In fact, it almost looked like he was in easy mode. Like I think, especially when he was like in pure man coverage. Yeah. Like because he had the sideline to work with. When you're in the slot, you're on such an island. And like because he had that leverage to play with, it made his click and close and his like ability to break on the ball and keep everything in front of him. It was just like otherworldly good.
Yeah, both him and whatever the DB coach does, the way that they process routes at Texas and the way that they kind of just are aware of their spacing and know how to use the sideline to their advantage. And for a guy that's played, I'm looking at his stats right now. So he played 679 snaps at corner this past year, but before that, it was like 180 combined snaps. It's so in the NFL, you're so used to guys that struggle outside, maybe moving to nickel. I don't know if that's the case really anymore with the way the NFL has shifted. It used to be, if you can't play outside. Maybe you can get a couple snaps at nickel in our, when nickel wasn't really the base defense and like it is now. But for a guy to go from the slot to outside corner and, like you said, maybe even look better is insane. I was telling you, with Cooper DeJean, I always thought he would be a good NFL player, but I thought there were some hip fluid limitations and kind of when he was playing outside corner at Iowa, I sort of saw some limitations that might have relegated him to either a safety or a slot corner. I didn't know if he had the speed, the agility, especially like the lateral quickness to be a outside corner, especially when it came to flipping his hips and running downfield. Barron doesn't have those issues. Like he's a fluid,
insane movement skill.
Yeah, and there's some good corners in this class, but I would say that this class might lack a lot of the guys who have like that quick twitch. I think there's a lot of
completely agree.
Yeah, like I think there's a lot of guys that are technically sound and they can, because they're so technically sound, they can maybe get away with not having the traits and the agility that you would like to see. I think Barron has both. He has this insane football IQ and he can just move like you want, an all-pro cornerback would move. Just totally. You don't see a lot of just wasted movement. You don't see a lot of stutter stepping or anything when he's flipping his hips. I'm with you. If Travis Hunter wasn't in this class and just kind of like an alien, I think Barron would easily be my cornerback one. And I like Will Johnson. We'll talk about Will Johnson. I just think when it comes to sort of being scheme proof and a guy that you can,
great point.
And not having to worry about pigeonholing him and, saying, oh, this is only cover 3 corner. We can only use him in this, and we'll be lucky if he can, do anything else. I think he can do everything. So.
Yeah, he's the opposite. He's not like you got to worry about the scheme. He's just the kind of guy where if you have first of all, if you have multiple holes in your defensive background, he should be at the top of your list of people to look at. Yeah. I honestly think he has top 10 talent.
I do too.
Legitimately. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes top 15 in this draft. If you're a team right now that doesn't love what you have at one of your corner positions and your slot, this is a guy you need to scoop up.
Oh.
So it's like, even if you like it, if you're the Bears, you probably don't need a starting nickel for the foreseeable future. Honestly, you have a really good one in Kyler Gordon. But if you wanted to draft Jahdae Barron to go just be your outside corner, especially with I'm not the highest on Tyrique Stevenson. I don't know if I would love to move at 10, but if you trade back, I would be fine with this move. And I think that his ability outside, despite his size, is so good that you could consider him even if you already had your nickel position locked down.
Yeah, I think a team like the Packers, who I think pick 23rd.
Absolutely hate that.
Yeah,
and I did. It's a great point.
I was like, so if you wanted him, you'd have to move back. You can move, but I think the Packers, Jair Alexander's not going to be on the team next year, from everything I've read. And then they've lost I think
next year, 2025.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be the rumor is
he's going to get cut.
Either cut or traded.
Or is he a free agent? Oh, whoa. Okay.
Yeah, so I think.
Good riddance.
Some beat writer. I mean, it's speculation at this point, but it seems to be
foregone conclusion. But it seems like this is a position of need for the Packers.
Yeah, because I think they lost Stokes and a couple other guys that logged snaps for them in their secondary. So they really are pretty thin. And when you think of what Barron can do, he can play outside and slot, and just I would feel like he'd be a guy that they'd have circled if he fell to them. But I'm with you. If the Bears could find a way to trade back to 15 or 16 and maybe pick up another mid-round pick in the process and take Barron, he'll be one of those players that if they took him, fans would be like, "Who's that?" I don't understand who this. And then it'd be like that saying, you see that, and then a week later, after everybody's been able to look at his highlights, they'll be like, "This guy's going to be great."
1 week in the training camp. Okay, everybody's talking about Jahdae Barron.
Yeah, exactly. So next up is Trey Amos. Decent, so Trey Amos has an interesting story. He was at Alabama for a few years and then wound up going to Ole Miss. Last year, Alabama he could not get started. He basically Alabama had Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terry and Arnold, both guys that went. I know Terry and Arnold went in the first round. I think Kool-Aid went early in the second round. So you're not going to get playing time from those two guys. And it seems, I mean, through his career in three seasons, he has a total of 23 snaps in the slot. So he's not really, he's purely an outside boundary cornerback.
My very first note, pure outside corner.
Yeah. So he's not going to be playing slot. I think he's sort of flying under the radar. I think there's a lot to like about Trey Amos.
I literally think there's only one thing not to like. I really love his game. Like he's a classic press corner. He likes to get his hands on people. He might be a little bit undersized for like a classic press corner role.
Right.
But he makes up for it with really nice technique in his press. He does not get sloppy with his hands. He'll hold you if you don't fight him off. And when you do, he's already there with the second hand. Like he's really good in that sense. He's got good game sense too. For a guy that probably will be looked at as being a press corner at the next level, when you let him sit back and play zone too, he's got a great feel for zone. I think he can be a really good pro, like dependent. Like I think he's pretty scheme versatile. Like I don't think there's a whole lot of stuff he can't do. My only issue really is he's not the quickest.
Right.
He's fast, but he's not the quickest. And he makes up for that by having awesome technique with his legs and good mirroring and great technique with his arms, but he's not the quickest. So, I think that's why you probably never will see him in the slot. If you're going to ask him to open him up his hips both ways, like it's tough. But as an outside corner that can keep him, use the sideline to help themselves, I really, really like. Seriously, and it's crazy again how far like the Will Johnson train has fallen, but like he is slightly on par with like Will Johnson as a prospect for me.
Yeah, I think it's always weird. Like anytime I see an Alabama defensive back, they usually end up being pretty decent. Unless was it Joe Hayden that went, or there was a guy that was pretty bad out of Alabama. But I mean, since Saban was there, they seem to
they pump
him out pretty. And I agree. I just saw a very good corner with very good ball skills on a good defense and a great conference. Like he matched up well on against elite competition, which, some of these guys we'll be talking about soon. You can't say the same for. So I think it's less of a projection. I just think, he sort of falls into that category where I guess maybe you just don't see a lot of the flashiness that some of these other guys have. You just have, and you might think of him as like maybe a boring prospect, which I would, for lack of a better term, I don't think he's a boring prospect. I think he's definitely an underrated prospect. Especially when you consider that I feel like him and, like you said, Will Johnson, they're sort of flipped on how I perceive them. I think Will Johnson's getting a lot of overrated, pub. And I think Trey Amos, I don't know if it's because he transferred or he really only has like one season of being a starter, but it was a really good season. Yeah. So it's tough. When I'm looking at some of these prospects, especially press corners, the recovery speed is so important for them, especially if they let a guy get behind them.
Yeah.
And Trey Amos has great recovery speed. I agree that I think he has very good speed in the sense of like, I think he's got fluid movement and his technique is so good that it can make up for the lack of maybe, what you see at the combine when it's, I couldn't do with, Jaylon Johnson is a guy who isn't the flashiest speed guy, but because his technique is so sound and he knows when to flip his hips and get upfield and trail a guy, I think you don't really care about what he tested. And I think Trey Amos is one of those guys that I don't really care what he tests because the film shows me a guy who's really a complete package when it comes to a cornerback. Not a lot of flaws in his game. So,
and it's funny too. I think we also should probably highlight by the nature of gradienting colors on Excel. Like if you only have 4 of them and one of them's a 4.3 and one of them's a 4.5, 4.43 isn't going to look great. That is an awesome time frame. I thought he was going to come out and run like a 4.55, and I was going to be fine with it. him running that, it actually kind of did like back up what you saw in film. He did do a good job of catching up and people got ahead of him. It really was just short area quickness was the only thing I would have looked at as like a pure worry from my point of view. Despite the fact that he's a little bigger and maybe a little bit heavier, I thought his speed, his straight line speed, was totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. When I was doing research for the safeties, I looked up Malcolm Jenkins because I know how important he was for Dennis Allen. And he was if you look them up on like the NFL site, they'll give you their production score, their athletic score. And anyway, he was the number one athlete in that year's cornerback class, and he ran a 4.5 40. So it just goes to show in like 15 years how much more athletic freaks these guys are becoming. We're like now a 4.5 is like, wow, that guy's slow. Like I need a guy like Nate Wiggins who runs like a 4.2, and it's like, well, let me see the play speed. Like, and that's where, when you hear scouts talk about like play speed or play strength, it's like the guy can be the fastest guy in underwear, in his running shorts, but like I want to see his tape because that's going to tell me, how quickly he moves. And especially with cornerback, especially with press cornerback, just having fluid hips is so important when you got to move upfield. I think that was a big reason why a guy like TJ Tampa fell like he did last year, was that he was a big hulking corner for Iowa State, but he's almost like a pure zone corner because he just had hips that just didn't want to move.
Yeah. And Trey Amos didn't run the agility drills at the combine. And my thought would be that that's probably got something to do with it. I didn't think he had the best like short-term agility, though. That's not fair. Yeah. Like I said, I think he did flip his hips well. I think his speed turns were great. But like it's also one of those things where like I don't like as an outside corner, I don't need you to have like elite level like Julian Edelman, Bryce Callahan type quickness. Right. You can keep the game in front of you a little bit more so that you don't need to be guessing and changing direction at the last second.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good move by him to not do it because if he goes and puts a medium type time together on those, and people start to have questions, but you don't do it, and then you just have the tape to work with, and the tape is awesome.
Yeah. I agree. You can get so in the weeds with like the testing scores when they do that stuff, and it really just doesn't. I think it's some of these guys are such athletic freaks that I think you can do it. It can kind of validate maybe what you saw on tape, but then there's just some players that just don't test well. But you watch their tape, and it's a totally different animal. So, speaking of a guy who flipping hips, Benjamin Morrison. This will be an interesting one. I watched a lot of him this year and last year. Last year, though, I was watching for Cam Hart, who went to the Chargers, but Benjamin Warren was popping off on film because he was just such a good corner. And then this year he had a hip injury that basically sidelined him. And for a cornerback, that's probably the worst area you can get an injury.
Not exactly what you want to do, but from what I've read, it does seem that it's like something that it's long-term worry isn't like it's not like something he has to worry about a re-injury.
Yeah, that's good because it's so tough.
Deal with it and get over it.
Yeah, it's tough for like Benjamin Morrison is a great example of like it's tough for like you and me to evaluate like a round grade for him because we don't have access to the medicals that the NFL teams do. So it's like, if his hip is fully healthy, he's a first-round cornerback all day.
Seriously, yeah. I'm glad you said it. I don't know. I don't know if mine would. Oh man, it might be. His game is so nice.
Yeah,
like the things that we've said that we've loved about like all these other corners are really true of him as well. Like he's got probably what I would consider to be the perfect frame for the position. He's about 6 foot 190. You're getting bigger than that. You pretty much get isolated to the outside. Getting smaller than that, you're probably going to be a slot. Where he's at, he can thrive and excel at both positions. And I also think he could. He played mostly outside, but his movement skills were so good. Just smooth moving, like really good control. He's like long and lean. He's got long arms. At least looks like he's got long arms for being only 6 foot. What else did I have here in my notes? Like he just has great game sense. He was a full playmaker in that backfield and like always made a play in the big situations for him.
Yeah, he's I had in my notes. I thought he was another scheme versatile cornerback if he's fully healthy.
Yeah.
He's a guy that and and I think that's important for Dennis Allen's defense because he relies on a lot of cover 1 and cover 3, but you want guys that you can mix coverages up. A lot of Dennis Allen's bread and butter was disguising his coverages and then right before the snap shifting to something totally different. And usually it's it involves that player that's on the weak side, whether that's a safety coming down to cover or a second cornerback. And I think when we talk about these guys in the context of the Bears, we're really looking for like a cornerback too, because Jaylon Johnson is your elite guy. So you're looking for the guy that maybe pushes out Tyrique Stevenson, but at the least challenges Tyrique Stevenson. So when I'm looking at Benjamin Morrison on tape, I'm just seeing a cleaner type of football than someone like Tyrique Stevenson. And, another player that if he was fully healthy, probably is like a top 20 cornerback. I think he's got that sort of polish to his game. Like you said, the size is perfect for a cornerback. The hip injury will always, while we talk about it, it's something you have to raise an eyebrow to, but it's not like he's a guy that's oft injured. I think this is like the first major injury. So he's not someone that's got like debilitating lower body injuries and then it all accumulated with a hip injury. It was it's just something that's probably, I think you could classify it as a freak accident. So yeah, he's a guy. I don't know, if I was Ryan Poles, I don't exactly know how willing we talked about Barron. He was a guy that I would be chomping at the bit to get if I knew I could trade back a couple picks. I don't know if Morrison's in that same. He just screams like a perfect pick for like the Ravens, who will get him at the end of the first round, and then he'll end up being like an all-pro for the next 10 years. Like they seem to like get these guys that like Kyle Hamilton and these guys that like they fall because of just these extenuating circumstances.
Reason.
Yeah. But I would, he seems like a perfect sort of player for the Bears. I mean, if he did tumble into round 2 and, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility that he's there at 39 or 41, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears strongly considered him for what he could be if they drafted. And that's kind of one of the things I think the Bears have the luxury of doing is, if they want to take a cornerback, you really can take a gamble on some of these players. The Bears are so deep at that position that, if they want to gamble and roll the dice on some of these guys who have just more traits than technique, or a guy like Morrison who has a year of, or a few years of really good game film and then 1 year where he just had an injury, I think the Bears can afford to do that in the context of drafting a cornerback with their cornerback room. I think they have other areas of need that might rate higher than cornerback, but if the value is there, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, it's I think watching this as Bears fans, what you need to consider is how much do the Bears like Tyrique Stevenson, and how much of the Bears going to play into what we've typically seen be the cornerback model in the Dennis Allen defense. I would imagine that, we'll never really know what they think about Tyrique Stevenson until they make some of these moves to make that evident. They're not just going to come out and say something on that. But I think that we should probably consider, how much, I know that a lot of people are worried that the Bears are going to draft people strictly based on like size and length and like that kind of model into like the type of players that we're going to be drafting on our defense for Dennis Allen, and we're looking at Dennis Allen's past to try and find that model. I think we probably need to consider that maybe it will be a little bit different with Ben Johnson as head coach. It might be that he asks him to, maybe play a little bit more fluid in that. I don't know specifically, but we can't say for sure. But considering that, the typical Dennis Allen model is that long, strong press corner.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, because we're so strong in the slot position with Kyler Gordon, when you're looking at someone they might take a shot on in these early rounds, to compete, you're probably wanting to look at someone like that. Now, there's no doubt in my mind Ben Morrison can do that, but I would be worried that if they did lean towards playing more to that really exaggerated version of that, and
Mhm.
they wanted to go with someone like Shavon Revel or
Yeah.
Porter, then I think you'd miss out on a guy like Ben Morrison who has all the skill in the world to play the outside position, just maybe not in that one model of how we're expecting the Bears to want to have it look.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think they fired that guy that I just remember that goofy infograph from like, was it Hard Knocks or 1920
Oh
football
my goodness.
where it was like they had the A score for all these,
Bear
and it was
score,
like
yeah.
Well, it's a flawed like metric when Velus Jones is the best on the team. Like
Dude,
if he's
Jaylon Johnson and Chase Claypool.
yeah,
You
and
really saw that, and then the third guy was Justin Fields, and you're like, oh, I really hope that he's gonna. Why does he have to be lumped in with them?
Yeah. So like I do think like because I mean I certainly think the first few drafts it was like the Bears it was like they were drafting as a team that liked the idea of analytics but didn't exactly like they had all the ingredients but couldn't bake the cake of like what they were needed to look for and use the analytics. And I think Ben Johnson has I think Bears fans can rest assured that both Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen, I think they know exactly what they want. And I do think they'd be willing to deviate from maybe their like archetype of those players. But I certainly think, like you said, I think they know what they want, where it's not going to be like if they took a guy like Benjamin Morrison, it's because Dennis Allen has conviction that he can play within his scheme and excel. And I think, I think Bears fans should rest assured, whereas in previous regimes, I think they sort of might have. I mean, Karan Abagaji will always be one of those guys. He could end up being a really good player, but he seems to be like to me the benchmark for this, where it's like, okay, I can see why you took this guy, but like, did you just take him because? Like, I want to know the logic behind taking that pick because he seemed like a really interesting choice at the time, like a developmental guy. But like, are you just taking him because you put him in this athletic score and he, popped out a great number and it's like, oh, this guy's here. It's, because he didn't seem like he had ever played football when he like, and that's unfair to him because he got thrown in a terrible situation his rookie year. But, give me guys who somewhat fit the mold, but you also know the floor too. And I think Benjamin Morrison, to your point, is that guy where it's like, okay, maybe he's not the typical Dennis Allen cornerback, but he can play the position. So, but moving on, you bring up Shavon Revel or save. I don't know how to say his name. I think he said it in an interview. I think the H is silent. I think it's Shavon.
Really?
But if you want to talk about a pure traits cornerback, that's him. I mean, so another guy that tore his ACL this year, so only played in 3 games, which is a bummer. Because if you watch him, it from a pure trait, like athletic freak sort of mentality, it's like Quinyon Mitchell, who again was a guy who went to Toledo and wasn't playing against elite competition, and it just showed on tape that he was just dominating over these guys. And that's kind of like Shavon, but at the same time, like he really needed this year to polish up his game. The technique is just all over the place, and you see a guy who is dripping with traits. I mean, 6'2", 194, 4'4", 40, 32 and 5/8 inch arms. I mean, the guy is just he's a physical freak. And I mean, but you're also this is a guy you draft and you just want to give him a developmental year if you can help it, and maybe sprinkle him in games if the Bears are up by like 3 scores, because I think he needs a good year. And I think because of that, I don't know. I think there could just be a team that is going to fall in love with the traits, because so if he reached his ceiling, you're talking about a guy who is athletic enough to cover like a Ladd McConkey, who is just an insane short area burst agility guy, but also big enough to cover like AJ Brown. And those guys are hard to come by in the NFL. Usually they can do one or the other. Maybe they can do one really well and they're adequate at the other. This is a guy that can, do both, but his technique is just so, I don't want to say bad, but it's just not refined. Like it's just he kind of is like he's getting away with a lot of stuff because of his athleticism that in the NFL I don't think he'd be able to get away with.
Yeah, I think if he could have tested, I think he would have been another guy similar to Trey Amos, where he would have loved his stuff as long as he didn't do the agility stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny that he's only 6'1" and a bit, because he plays and the way he looks on film was like 6'3" or more. And it might be because, like you said, he actually does have freakishly long arms. But my first note is insane size. So seeing that at the combine he only tested for 6'1" and a bit is interesting, and I think maybe the long arms gives that away.
That is true.
He's a willing tackler, completely willing tackler, and he's got the aggressiveness of like a linebacker. And he's a little stiff, he's a little upright, but he's when he's healthy, he might be one of the best deep ball DBs in this class.
Yes.
Like, you aren't going to run away from him. Mm-hmm. And when he turns and jumps, he probably would have had one of the better verticals in this class too, because he covers so much range, is insane.
Yeah.
He has great recovery speed. Like, he can truly be like, his press is a little messy. It can get a little messy, but he's willing to do it.
Yeah.
He could truly be like a very good starting outside corner in the NFL. I don't know. I kind of feel that, based on the injury, honestly, this could be someone that if the Bears were higher on Tyrique Stevenson, then, we might think. If they didn't think this year that they needed anyone but Tyrique Stevenson, and then worst case, they can start Terrell Smith. This is a guy that, depending on where he goes, you could grab, like you said, you could grab and stash and play behind Jaylon Johnson and play behind Tyrique Stevenson and play behind Terrell Smith. 3 guys that play very, very similar ball to what you would want him to play
right
in the NFL. Like, he could be a good value. The problem is, for me, like, you're banking on upside, like, you're banking on stuff that you haven't seen a ton at that level. And it would probably have to be like, 4th to 5th round or below. And you probably just won't get him there because of the athlete that he is.
Right. And if you're, we'll talk about him in a minute, but like, if you want to go that low, just wait for Darian Porter. Cause I think you could actually get him in like the 4th or 5th round, and he's a similar sort of freak as Shavon, but like, I think he'll go earlier. He just seems like a guy that I don't think he'll get overdrafted, but he just, because he missed this year, he really is so much of a projection, and at a position that's so volatile like cornerback. Yeah. And it's a tough gamble. I
think the fact that he's got that ACL injury too.
It's
gonna put you. I think it's probably going to put you in a position where he will. Like, I mean, Eddie Jackson had all pro type ticket. We talked about it in the last class,
right?
And he had that broken leg and moved him down to, I think, 4th. I think, upside of his athletic ability, he probably could have jumped into the 2nd or 3rd round if he was completely healthy. Because I still think, we didn't get to see a full season of tape on him, but based on the tape that we did see, there were still some things he needs to work out. He's a bit of a project. But the upside was there to go in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think with that injury, you probably will see him go, 4th to 5th. I would just be, if you draft him in the 2nd or 3rd round, coming off an ACL, knowing that he's an upside project, and then don't get something at him, like, those are the kind of things that you lose your job for.
Yeah. It's such a gamble because, I mean, if you can get him on day 3, like, I'd be all for that type of develop. That's like the perfect type of player that you want to take a gamble on, a high traits later round pick that if he flames out, oh well. I mean, I have to go and look. I think he still I think he played special teams. So I mean, you're still getting a guy that can play teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where, freak athletes will always get overdrafted, I feel like. And I'm with you. I couldn't pull the trigger on anything earlier than like a 3rd, but I can see, there might be some team that's falls in love with him and thinks they can, but he's such a project player too. And they say it takes a year of recovery before you're back to yourself with ACL injuries. I think even Grady Jarrett said that from the one he suffered a few years ago, it took a year to actually get back. So I know the technology and the recovery is more advanced than it was 15 years ago, but it's still an injury with, if he saps and you're hoping he keeps his athleticism while you can coach him to refine his technique. But I mean, if he loses any of his athleticism, his agility, and his recovery speed from the ACL injury, then I mean, you're talking about a guy who I wouldn't want to take him on like day one and then, or early day two, because that could be a pick that could really blow up in your face.
Totally.
So I guess we'll move on to one of the more polarizing prospects, Will Johnson.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny with Will Johnson because he shouldn't be polarizing.
Yeah.
He almost suffers from being too damn good for too dang long. But you're getting prospect fatigue because, like, last year he was playing so good that people were saying, well, this guy's a top 5 pick next year.
Yeah.
And even the year before that, people were like, yeah, this guy's going to be a top 5 pick in 2 years. And then he came out this year and played great. He played great again. And we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, we talked about Will Johnson. We have him 6th down the list, 8th down the list. Yeah. And there's no doubt that this is a first-round player. Like, you'll see him mocked to the Bears at 10. But it's one of those things where, we've talked about him for so long. It's almost like when some of these conversations come up, it's like the Will Johnson part's assumed. And, like, he kind of gets drowned out because of that. Because, like, now it's like, whoa, where did Jahdae Barron come from? And it's like, okay, well, Travis Hunter's this and this and this. And, you guys are sleeping on Trey Amos. But it's like we have been talking about Will Johnson in this spot for 3 years, and he's done nothing but play great outside corner at one of the biggest programs in the country, playing in huge games, winning national championships, playing against, top 25 ranked teams all the time. And, like, it's unfortunate because he'll probably end up being, like, cornerback 3 on my board because of how much some of these guys I love. But he truly is like a day one starting outside cornerback 1 in the NFL. Like, he is the only guys that I would draft over him at this position in this draft are Barron and Hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. He suffers from the same thing Malachi Starks gets, where it's like he's been so good for his entire collegiate career that it's like the flaws get magnified because there's so few that you end up Seriously. Maybe making a mountain out of a molehill. I think, when guys get behind him is really the only, I think when I say he struggles, it's all contextual. He struggles for a guy that'll be a first round pick, but I mean, he's still really good at, it's not like he, a guy gets behind him and then, he falls face down, can't recover. He still can. It's just, if you're talking about holes in his game, one of the better tackling cornerbacks in a class that I think you can struggle to find. You see, I think tackling is one of those traits that gets overlooked for defensive backs, but in Dennis Allen's scheme, you need to be a good tackler. You need to be able to come up and tackle. And
that's a great point. This would be like Dennis Allen's like dream cornerback. Yeah. Like, this is a guy 6'2", long arms, outside corner, like good technique, like great mirroring. His click and close is great. His fluidity is great. He can play press. He's best with the game in front of him. This is a guy that the last 2 years, he hasn't allowed a touchdown and has like 6 total picks and like 15 pass breakups. Like, it's one of those guys that it's like, unfortunately, feels like it's getting overthumped with him. But I would imagine that when the Bears are having their meetings, especially when they're talking about the DBs in this class, that Dennis Allen doesn't, raise his hand and say, we should try and make that Will Johnson guy a Bear if it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen people mock him recently. I don't know if they're doing it out of, like, if they're genuinely doing it or just trying to, generate clicks. because
my thing is, I think it's mainstream. I think it's mainstream guys that don't really know where the Bears are at, like authentically, that
right.
love a player and see maybe that need with the Tyrique Stevenson thing and just trying to make matches need. I don't know if it makes the most sense. I think most Bears fans would agree if you spent that top 10 pick on a DB, on a cornerback,
Yeah.
You probably missed the mark, and I think we would both agree that even then, like that position has so much depth. Like you could go into the next 2 seasons, no doubt, with Terrell Smith and Tyrique Stevenson as your cornerback twos, and probably be fine. Like it would be a very, very luxury pick for the Bears.
Right.
But like some other team is going to draft him in the first round, and he's going to be their cornerback 1 and be totally happy with him all throughout the rookie contract.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like, it's a good point because the Bears, it would be a luxury pick, but it would be, he would make such a great compliment to what Jaylon Johnson can do and be a guy that, you would have 2 lockdown cornerbacks for the foreseeable future. It's just,
it'd watching us live talk ourselves into this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can certainly, I think it is, like, I would not say it's a position of weakness, at all for the Bears, but, I could certainly be talked into, if the first 9 picks go and like Genty's off the board and Graham's off the board and some of the guys that, Will Campbell's off the board, and it's just like nobody wants to trade up, and you're staring a guy like Will Johnson in the face, who last year would have been a top 5 pick.
Totally.
And it's like, all we've heard about is Ben Johnson the philosophy with the Lions and Brad Holmes was, we just want weapons. We just want great players, regardless of really need. We just want to stack our roster with legit players. And you've seen that, they kind of bucked against the trend of, don't draft a linebacker, and they take Jack Campbell. And, so it would be something that, if Dennis Allen, I think he's going to have a strong say in the war room or whatever they call it now. And, I think the board would have to fall a very specific way for Will Johnson to be considered, but I certainly wouldn't think it's like, I'd give it like maybe like 5% to 10% odds, but it would be something.
I think this is one of those players that you circle as far as, if the Bears trade down, what could the world look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I do think, he'd be a great trade down target. And he does seem to be one of these guys that's just kind of a victim of his own success. Like he just has put together 3 good years at college, and it's like, prospect fatigue is the perfect way to put it. You see it all the time. It was the same thing with Kool-Aid McKinstry, and it drove me nuts last year, was the guys just so, I think because they're such solid at the collegiate level, maybe there's this misunderstanding that they won't continue to develop at the NFL level, and that and it's like, no, these guys are just, unlike some of these guys that they come in and they struggle for 2 years and then they kind of put it all together the last year of college. He just stepped in immediately and he was great his first year. And then, the next 2 years, I think he sort of suffers because he was so good his first year that maybe people assumed he took a step back, and it's like, no, he's just really good.
Yeah. And it's also like being great at cornerback. It's one of the hardest positions in football to be. Cornerback and safety, for whatever reason, maybe because you're consistently the last line of defense, and like it's the offensive job to basically attack your positioning on the field with the passing game.
Yeah.
It is extremely hard to have to be consistently good season over season. Like, go find your favorite cornerback or go find your favorite DB and like check their stats year over year. And for someone that's consistently considered the best in the game, you almost just give them a pass when they have down years, because you're like, that's just what it's like being a cornerback or a safety.
Yeah.
And, Will Johnson, 3 years in a row, the last 3 years, he's had 2 touchdowns allowed, 9 picks. He's averaged 3 picks a season. He's had a PFF grade of 75 or higher overall the last 3 seasons. He's played a total of, almost 1,500 snaps at outside cornerback. Like, he is definitely a player that someone is going to draft, not overthink it, and get themselves a great outside cornerback.
Yeah. So moving on to, we talked about sort of the high floor Will Johnson offers. Darian Porter is another Really high traits guy, kind of has a weird
4.3
college
flat.
career.
4.3 flat is absurd.
Yeah, and big. I have to look up his combine, but he was they had him listed at 6'3", which is like the top 97th percentile of cornerbacks. I mean, a 6'3" corner that can run that quickly. And
I would say, though, without knowing and looking at his height and weight, I would bet my bottom dollar he didn't run the agility drills if he had a 9.99.
yeah, see, well, they had him at shuttle. They had him at 671 in the 3 cone. I don't know if these are combine
Really?
measures. Yeah, oh, they are combines. Yeah, so he was top
good.
Yeah, top 87% in 3 cone and then top 80% in shuttle, which again begs the question. He's a 6-year senior. This is his last year of eligibility. Why is he just now the starter at cornerback? If he
this is Darian Porter?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got it here too. Yeah, wow. Wow, man. 6'7", 3 cone is like absurdly good. I said this to you before. Like full transparency, I haven't got. This is like one of the few corners I haven't got to watch. I haven't watched any Darian Porter yet.
It's so. I guess I'll give a little background and then kind of what I saw. And I know Q, feel free to chime in because I know you said Porter was one of the guys you watched. And 6-year player, he was recruited as a wide receiver. Iowa State tried to play him there for 3 years at wide receiver, and it just didn't work. So they moved him to cornerback, and then the next 2 years, he just was mostly like, I think, special teams because he logged over those 2 years fewer than 250 snaps across those 2 years at corner. And then this past year, he was the full-time starter at corner, and kind of just, I mean, I'm looking at PFF now, and I mean, it's insane. 90.1 coverage grade, which anything above like a 70 is PFF.
Pretty darn good.
Yeah, if you don't know the grading system, I know it's a little wonky. Like 60 is sort of like your baseline average good player, or I shouldn't say good, but average player. And then anything above like a 70 is considered very good. And then you get into like the 80s and the 90s, and those are like the elite of the elite. Like it's anything above a 90 is ridiculously good.
Nick, was that agility testing? You're sure that was combine?
Yeah, I just did the same thing. The first graphic I saw didn't have it, but the second one
because I thought he hadn't done it at the combine, and maybe his pro day just happened.
I use NFLDraftBuzz.com for like the measurables, and they have it updated. It says from the combine.
Yeah,
whenever it's from, like, I just didn't remember it on the
maybe
card, but like that is it. I didn't realize that when I made his video that his agility was that, like, that is insane. And that, if I'm being honest, I didn't see that on the tape. Like, sometimes the
999 RAS scores are misleading, and like things are like strategically left out, so like they show the best picture of their athletic ability. Like what I'm looking at, I just sent it to you guys in the chat. His performance at the combine is legitimately one of the most impressive things I have ever seen. This is legit.
Yeah.
4.3, like 1.48 10-yard split, 6.7 3 cone. He's basically 6'3", 200. Jump 11-foot broad jump. Like that is one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And like,
I mean, this is Dennis Allen's guy. He is almost exactly Marshawn Lattimore physically.
Yeah.
Like when you do the RAS compare, they are very similar.
Yeah. It's on tape you see some hip tightness. The testing doesn't indicate hip tightness. I think and I don't know, sometimes hip tightness is a matter of just physical, which you would think for a guy who's 6'3", you're going to have some a higher center of gravity. It's just going to be harder to get lower. But I think with a guy like him, you could say a good portion of it is just technique and familiarity with the position, because this was his first year as a starter. So it's kind of like, because his testing was still so elite, maybe the hip tightness was less a physical impediment and more of a what's the word? Like just a familiarity with playing cornerback, because he wasn't playing corner. I mean, he was moved to cornerback
He
It's
still
just
doesn't know how to play corner.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, he played at Iowa State's cover 3 where he's playing deep third like every single snap and bailing out on it. Like he doesn't really play a whole lot of different coverages.
Right. And
Dude, I'm following along in real time here. I'm seeing some of these clips now. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to watch them.
yeah,
There's something here, man.
so like I'll be curious how quickly or how much he's climbing up draft boards, especially with his testing. Because I thought 3rd or 4th round for him, maybe late 3rd for a guy who had, I mean, not starting.
I tell you what, if this is actually his draft, dudes like this don't make it out of the 2nd round.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like with that, it's gonna be, somebody's gonna take a swing on him, and I think the Bears would be.
Seattle had a few years ago. They got him like the 5th.
Tarique Woolen.
Yeah, Tarique Woolen.
Yeah,
that's another guy was on par with this, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he's a similar. Yeah. I think that's a similar player where you can expect years of where, like, I think Tarique Woolen's 1st or 2nd year he looked elite, and then it's kind of like. He's still not a bad corner, but he kind of settled down to being like a decent above average corner. But
I think he even did ability testing.
I was exactly, because he was very straight line guy. Iowa State had him listed at 6'4" too, and let me tell you, color me pleasantly surprised to measure him at 6'2'7". Like once you get into 6'3", it almost feels like gimmicky. Like when you want to do the big long corner thing, 6'2" and a bit is like absolutely perfect for me. I need to watch this guy now.
And I'm pretty sure he has offensive tackle arms, like 33 inches.
Yeah, let me see his arms.
33-inch arms.
33 and an eighth. He could play guard.
It's crazy watching some of these clips too, like knowing that he's a converted wide receiver, right?
Yeah. So it's just, I mean, I would love if somehow the Bears could get him in like the 3rd round.
I have no idea where this guy's getting mocked. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears start to look at Darian Porter. I mean, I have to watch more tape, so maybe there's a bunch of stuff I'm not seeing that I don't get. But like, if all this is true and the tape is impressive, like this is a guy that could easily be in consideration at 39 or 41.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think.
It really hinges on if you can't fix everything in one off season. If they think to themselves for one more year, we're fine with. Stevenson and Terrell Smith, then maybe not. But if it's a position they want to address, like this could not be more up like Dennis Allen.
Yeah, and
Dennis Alley.
Yeah, and I feel like he'd be a great guy to stick behind Stevenson and Johnson. I'm on the mock draft database, and of course, like since the combine, he's getting like mocked in the 1st round. I think the 1st round for a guy like that is still a little rich.
What is that? Is that grinding the mocks?
What's that? Oh yeah.
You guys familiar with grinding the mocks?
Yeah, so there's like I usually use mock draft database, but grinding the mocks I feel like it's better.
I know the problem I think with grinding the mocks is I feel like the database is small. You got like 40 players.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just bumped Porter up in mine to 6.85 grade, which is firmly a 3rd round grade, which means like you're probably not getting him at 72 with those athletic traits.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing him recently, like Packers, Ravens, and again Ravens. Of course, he's like a perfect Raven. They took TJ Tampa last year, so they've got but like in the Colts and the Bucks.
Well, here's the thing that I question with him, and because like. Yes, he fits Dennis Allen, but like I don't know. Let me check my notes. I didn't think that he was a really strong jammer at the line of scrimmage. And so much of what I think Dennis Allen wants to do is he just wants you to tie guys up, which physically he can do, but I'm just not sure there's evidence of it.
Right. He's more of a bail guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if that's a weird, like Iowa State runs that really like funky cover 3. It's not like a typical, it's like a really strange, I think it's called like a cyclone cover 3 or so. I think they like have a name. It's named after them because they have a, because that was the same thing with TJ Tampa last year, who came out of Iowa State. He was another guy, but he just had straight line speed. He did not have any agility to him, but it was, again, he was another big cornerback, and you would think a guy that big could press, but the press technique, I don't know if they just don't practice it very much at Iowa State, or if it's not emphasized.
It's just not what they do.
Yeah. So it's like, and we've seen guys, sometimes hand technique is easy to coach, because I think, wasn't that Braxton Jones' biggest issue at Southern Utah? They came in and they were like, he just didn't get coached how to use his hands. And then
it's still questionable.
Yeah. but like, I mean, this is a guy that I definitely think they're circling him. I mean, it's just, how high is he going to climb now that the combine's over? And like you said, Luke, once you actually start looking at his tape too, it's, you're not seeing a guy like Shavon, who is another athletic freak, but there's so many cracks and holes in his game that he needs to iron out. I mean, and I wouldn't say Darian
to pile on Shavon either. We like Shavon.
Yeah. I love. Usually,
I will say honestly, looking at that, and now having been unfamiliar with Darian Porter and now being pleasantly intrigued, I actually think, because spoiler alert, when we get to Darian Strong, I'm a pretty big fan of Darian Strong as well. I actually think Shavon, Revel aside, like I might have like 3rd round grades and above on every guy that you see here. Like this is such a strong cornerback class.
Yeah.
And if you're Dennis Allen too, like there's a lot of guys that really fit your mold.
Yeah. And I mean, see, I'm not familiar with next year's class, but I know last year, like when we talked about safeties, last year the safety class was weak, and I think this year it's gotten much stronger. I thought the cornerback class last year was pretty strong. I think there's a lot. I think this class has a lot more higher ceiling guys. I thought last year you had some real high floor guys with like Kool-Aid McKinstry. I liked Ennis Rakestraw, even though he got injured. I thought he was a good pick by the Lions. I think he'll end up, but you kind of got into like that 2nd and 3rd round, and you were looking at guys that were a little more boring as prospects. I think in this, you're looking at guys like, Shavon, Revel, Darian Porter. I mean, even Benjamin Morrison. I mean, these are guys that
I know. Where's Trey Amos?
Yeah, Trey Amos, like they could develop into legit corner,
Yeah.
Some of them, I think the floor for some of them is cornerback too. And then, you're looking at a ceiling of legit all pro cornerback 1. So,
we want to tackle Dorian.
Yeah, let's,
I like Dorian's game. I'll kick it off. So I think that Dorian, he's another pure outside corner, by the way he was used. I actually think, and I don't even know if I have like the agility stats to back it up, but the way that he moves and his quickness would lead me to believe that if you needed him to play more inside or like follow a guy in motion, he could do that better than like your typical outside corner. Mm-hmm. He's got good agility. He's got really good game sense. I think he's a bit of a playmaker. He can lack technique at times, but his mirroring and like his footwork and his ability to stay with you and keep your speed is truly elite. Truly elite, especially as an outside corner, pinning someone at the sideline. The problem is he's not exactly a press corner for that position. He's got some nice pop in his hands, but he's a little undersized, and it shows when he tries to jam some people. He can try and put his hands on people, and when he his first contact's nice, but when he tries to hold his hands on you, he can kind of get run through. That being said, I think he just has really genuinely good game sense and coverage ability. I think he, as far as the people I've watched, is the last person I think can be a true cornerback 1 in this class. I think he has that kind of upside to him. 4.5 isn't great, I think, but to some extent, when you watch his tape, his athleticism, might have been one of the things that you had an issue with. I think honestly, I would be surprised if he was any worse of an athlete than Will Johnson. Just Will Johnson didn't run his 40. They kind of had similar games to me in that their biggest weakness was when someone got to their outside shoulder and was running away from them. They couldn't really recover as much as that. But that was really it. I really liked Dorian Strong's game. I honestly think if he had a good counselor on his side, he wouldn't have run the 40. Because some people are going to look at that 4.5 and run him off as a slow corner, but that's how his game speaks.
Yeah, I mean, I've used the term before, and it's not a knock on cornerbacks. It's actually a compliment when I say Dorian Strong is he's kind of boring to watch because he's just a really technically sound cornerback, and you're not seeing, when we have to watch defensive backs, you have to watch like every single play, and it's a position that you just that's just by the nature of it. It's you can't.
It might be the position that if you watch a highlight pack, it's like it's the biggest disservice of their game.
Yes,
because like to some extent, it's one of those positions where when no one is talking about what you're doing a really good job.
Exactly, and that's kind of like Dorian Strong. He's been at Virginia Tech for a while, and he's just been a solid cornerback. And I agree with a lot of what you said. I saw a guy that I think again is. I don't want to call him a poor man's Will Johnson because I don't want to disrespect it. I certainly think Will Johnson is above him as a prospect, but I do think Dorian Strong, for what Dennis Allen wants to run, I've seen comps to like a Greg Newsome, and I think that's an interesting comp. I think Greg Newsome is another good cornerback that kind of, I think at Northwestern, you kind of say he's got a good, clean game to him. And I think Dorian Strong is another guy that, and I know he can play special teams. So, you can get him and move him along. Don't have to throw him into the wolves.
Dorian Strong right now is going at about pick 100. So about round 4.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably roughly where I would have too. You have some things that you probably will never be able to overcome athletically when you get to the NFL. Like these guys are just it's all the best athletes from college. So there will be some guys that probably will be able to run away from them. But you can draft and stash this guy and get him in an NFL weight room and get his press a little bit better because he's got some really natural things like on the movement side and on the just game sense side, the ability to play corner side that. It wouldn't surprise me if in a couple of years he's a really, really good outside NFL corner. Yeah,
I think, especially with you look at his PFF grades and it's just steady Eddie. And I don't know how much stock, some people don't put PFF. I think corner is one of those ones where you can actually sort of put some merit to how they grade because it is, like you said, it's the guy getting picked on. You can watch the technique and sort of make some informed decisions based off of the tape you see on PFF, and it's just 69.7, 68.3, 66.4, 67.9, 60. It's just like right down every game. It's like he's just putting together good tape. He's technically sound. You're not going to get a lot of real missteps. I think even Tyrique Stevenson is especially susceptible to just having these like lapses in. It almost looks like he doesn't know how to play cornerback. And we know that what he can be at his peak, but it's because sometimes the valleys can be so low that having a guy like Dorian Strong on your roster who is going to, I look at Terrell Smith similarly as that, like maybe Terrell Smith is probably never going to be Jaylon Johnson, but he's a good, solid depth cornerback that, you're not worried that if Tyrique Stevenson goes down, you're going to get a huge drop off when Terrell Smith is thrust into the lineup. And I look at Dorian Strong similarly. We just talked about Darian Porter, but a guy like Darian Porter who has 1 year of experience, that's a big red flag, especially for a guy that's been in college for 6 years. And, maybe we're not privy to some more information that NFL teams will be, but Dorian Strong's been at Virginia Tech and he's been a solid player the entire time that he's been there. So, I don't think the Bears have a 4th round pick, but let's say they trade back in the 1st and pick up a 4th round pick. And, maybe he is a guy that you look at as the start of day 3. I think that'd be a great pick, especially in Dennis Allen. If you're looking for insurance policies in this draft for a guy like Tyrique Stevenson, I think he's one of the better ones just because what you're getting with the player and the development it's much less of a projection than some of these other guys we've talked about. You sort of know what you're getting with Dorian Strong. He's just going to be an even keel cornerback. And I think there's a place for those types of players in the NFL. And I agree with you. I don't know if I don't think I think the first 3 rounds are a little rich, but if you can get a guy like him in the 4th round, I definitely think if the Bears haven't taken one previously, he's someone that you really want to highlight as could be a potential pick if they trade back into the 4th.
Yeah, Dorian Strong will be one of those guys that the Bears draft if they. He's not a guy that you need to be a player for you right away, and you probably can't expect him to be. But he can be an NFL player, and if you want to let him, get in the NFL for a year or two and learn and sit behind some pros and develop his game, he can be good.
Yeah. I guess with that being said, closing it on out, I mean, do you have is there someone that you've circled as just like a guy that you really want the Bears out of this class to?
It's tough. I mean, I love Jahdae Barron. Something about people that are just like pure world-class coverage players that like I just cannot get enough of. It's probably why like I love Makuba as well. Also Texas. But like he's so good that like if you're not drafting at 10 or drafting or trading back like 13 or 14, like you probably can't draft, and it's probably true of Jahdae Barron as well. Now, the thing I like about both of them, they're actually such similar players. I wouldn't be surprised if this is true of both of them. But I really think you could draft Barron and play him at safety, cornerback, slot, like any position that you need, and that's really part of his value. But I kind of think, if you're not drafting Travis Hunter or Jahdae Barron in that first round, when you're talking about corners, like I think you need to let the market chill a little bit and fall back and hopefully school back around in the 3rd round at 72 or in the later rounds.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they're not going to target one of the 2 big boppers with Hunter and Barron, I don't see I think you sort of are going to get diminishing returns if you want to use one of your 2nd round picks on these guys. I just think the position the group the Bears have is you spend a 2nd rounder on one of these guys. I don't think they're going to make a huge difference in the secondary. But when you start getting into like the later rounds, like, 3rd round, 4th round, and one of these guys, this is such an interesting position because with the injury concerns, it really is a crapshoot of where some of these guys are going to go. I mean, you could have a run on cornerbacks. But again, I don't think the Bears are in a position to panic. I don't think they need to panic. If they miss out on getting a cornerback, it's not going to be the end of the world. I'm with you. I mean, I love watching Barron. I just think he's a fun player. I think he gives I think his versatility, we were really giving Darian Porter a lot of props, and I think deservedly so with the athletic freak, but you can't even compare his football instincts and intellect with a guy like Barron, who is just, it could take Porter three or 4 years to even get close to what Barron is right now as a processor at the NFL. And with Porter at that time, I mean, he'd be like 29 years old, 28, 29 years old. And I just, if they are going to target a corner, I would like them to get someone who has versatility. Cause I just think, we mentioned Tyrann Mathieu on the last episode, but it's worth bringing up again. A guy like that is just sort of like a Swiss Army knife that the defense has to account for and isn't really a liability wherever you stick him. He's not a guy you have to hide. He's a guy that offenses have to game plan for. So I don't know, trade down, get him in the late 1st and then get Makuba in the 2nd. And then you've got the Texas secondary.
Oh my God.
And you play this off.
It's so funny, man. In the last 2 weeks, both of these guys have easily become 2 of my favorite players in the entire draft class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, especially with safety, it's so – I feel like no one is talking about the safety class when everybody's talking about how deep the defensive tackle class is. And I mean, rightfully so, the running back class. But, I mean, this safety class, too, on top of you've got some real game changers in there. So
I hear people telling me that this is a bad draft, and I'm wondering where.
Yeah,
it might just be quarterback.
I think I really think having a lack of like the generational quarterback always makes people like it sort of like poisons people's perception of a draft class. Is like, oh, like I'd have to go back and look at the Kenny Pickett draft, but everyone always talks about how terrible that was. And I'm like, was it a bad draft or was it just that Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback taken off the board?
You made me take Kenny Pickett in the first round.
Yeah, exactly.
We're probably getting off topic again. We're closing in on an hour here. So that's it. That's the breakdown of at least the cornerbacks that that are most likely to go, in that range, or the guys at the top of the draft. Some guys we didn't mention that are probably worth mentioning, or at least checking out yourselves, are Maxwell Harrison,
Yes.
University of Kentucky.
I agree.
I also don't know how to pronounce this next name. Florida State. You probably know because I feel like you're pretty good at pronunciations. Azariah.
Yeah.
Thomas.
Yes.
Those two guys we didn't get to, but are pretty universally well liked as well. We could go down the list, but again, there are two guys from Kentucky as well. You should check out Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson. With that, these are the guys you probably need to look at. It's probably not the most important look for the Bears right now on all the position groups in the team. It could be one of those ones where if you didn't want to address at all, you'd probably be fine. And there's a lot of position groups that's not true of. But it's a really nice position group this year. It's pretty deep. And in that 3rd, 5th range, you can probably find some really good value.
I agree. Well, thanks, guys, for checking us out. You can follow me at sniper_1154. Luke's at Luke O'Grady. Check us out on Tap Sportsnet, building the board. We're working on write-ups for all these guys. You can check out. We've got a pretty impressive staff of scouts, if I do say so myself, and they're putting out some awesome content. Q popped in. He's hammering out almost every other position group you can think of. So, share with your friends and, get familiar with some of these names because one of them might pop up on draft night and you want to know who they are. So with that said, take it easy, guys. Bear down.
Bear down.